Last Sunday, you had an amazing message presented to you by Pastor John Harper about being a generous giver. And the reason that we wanted to present a message like that to you is I want your life to be better in 2020 than it was in 2019. And so I think one of the things that makes our lives better is being generous towards God's work. And so Pastor John just brought this incredible message about being a generous giver because God's been generous to us. And I think if we would implement the things that he shared, 2020 could be a better year for us. And I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about something else I think we could implement in our life so that 2020 would be better as well. And it deals with offenses. You've been offended before. Somebody didn't shake your hand. Maybe this morning I offended you because I normally shake your hand, and today I didn't shake your hand. You got offended because you put out a friend request on Facebook, and they didn't reciprocate. They didn't accept your friend request. The little town that we pastored before we came here, you knew everybody in the whole town, and if you didn't know them, it didn't matter. You still waved at them anyway. If you were driving a car, you would have your hands on the wheel like this, and here's how you'd wave. Just like that. Did you miss that? I'll go over here and do it. You waved like this. Just like that, a little raise of the head. Or maybe you raised your finger. And if you didn't, they were offended. I know of people that were doing yard work, and they'd be bending over doing yard work, and a vehicle would drive by, and without even bending, they'd go like this. They just wave, because they know if they don't wave, that person's going to be mad at them because they were offended that they didn't wave. And then in the culture, the climate that we live in today, there's this whole thing about political correctness, about being political correct. And I don't know about you, but I'm just kind of bothered by the whole political correctness thing. And in fact, the fact that I'm bothered by political correctness might offend you. And if you're not offended, I might be offended. It just goes on and on. We live in a world of offended people, and it just goes on and on. We're offended by people's race. We're offended by people's religion, their ethnicity, their gender choices. We're even offended by team names, and so we want to change the name of a team. We're offended by all kinds of things. And if you're not offended by any of those, I'm offended that you're not offended by any of those. You kind of get me on that whole thing? And the reason that we get offended, I think, is because all of us have a different perspective on the same thing. We all have a different perspective on the very same thing. I thought, I'm a visual person. Let me share with you an example. I'm going to put a picture up here on the screen. I'm not going to, but some incredible people in the tech booth are going to put a picture up here. How many of you look at that picture right there, some of you see a beautiful woman in that picture. Do you see a beautiful woman in the picture? How many see a beautiful woman? How many see the old hag? Raise your hand. The Packers fans, that's what they are right there. So I just want to see that you're here this morning. See, all of us look at the very same thing, but we look at it completely different. And then as a result, we can get offended by those things. My way, let's just be honest, because I'm the pastor and I have the microphone this morning, my way is the right way to look at things. And if you don't think so, I'm offended by that. You got me on that whole thing? It just goes on and on and on and on. And if you're offended, if somebody has offended you and you're carrying an offense this morning, understand this. An offense is a lot like a big heavy rock. You just pick it up and you carry it around with you. Wherever you go, you carry the offense with you. And if you're offended, you have been offended by somebody, you're carrying an offense today. I offended you, Mama offended you, somebody else in church offended you. Your husband offended you, your kids offended you, you are offended by coworkers. If you're offended, here's my word for you, just get over it. Just get over it. It's not about you. This is a news flash. This is kind of a big news flash. When you go to work tomorrow, all the other employees in the workplace don't exist for you. Isn't that amazing? When you go to school tomorrow, all the other students in the whole school aren't there for you. When you go to the restaurant, all the people and all the servers and all the cooks aren't there just for you. But we live in such a narcissistic world that wants us to believe that it's all about me. And you can especially make it about you when you can post things on social media. Oh, you can rant a lot right there. But life isn't about you. You know, there's some really incredible politically correct examples I've run across. Just before Christmas, maybe you watch the news down in Bismarck, Mandan area, there's Custer State Park. Custer State Park has been there since the early 1900s, named after General George Armstrong Custer. Now there's a group of people that want to change it because they think that Custer is a culturally offensive name. So let's change it to something like Harmony Park. And it goes on even deeper. This is funny. I was reading that the terms ladies and gentlemen are not even acceptable in public anymore because some people in the crowd might not identify as a lady or a gentleman, so you're going to offend them. Isn't that incredible? Expecting people to be on time was declared culturally insensitive at Clemson University in their diversity training team because they were telling people in that team that it was culturally offensive to expect people to show up on time because for some people, time is fluid. I think it's offensive if you don't show up on time. Are you with me on that whole thing? It's just amazing. British students wanted to ban clapping in their school because it was culturally insensitive to deaf people. We get offended, don't we? That's the world that we live in. We even tear down statues. If anybody could talk to you about being offended, it's me. I'm blind. And you know what? You can't even use the word blind anymore. I am visually challenged. Let's be politically correct, right? And if you've been through the playgrounds of school and gone through school with kids and there was anything different about you socially, physically, you were too tall, too short, too wide, too thin, wrong kind of clothes, too right kind of clothes, whatever the case is, you know what it was to be offended. We've all been there. And this year, I want us to be better at not getting offended. Listen, nobody can offend you. Nobody can offend you unless you want to be offended. Nobody can offend you unless you want to be offended. So what we're going to do today is we are going to check your level of offendability. How easy is it to offend you? I can answer that question if I talk to other members in your family. How easy is it to offend you? I know the answer to that if I talk to some of the people you church with. How easy is it to offend you? I can answer that question for me if I talk to your coworkers. We don't think we're offendable. But other people around us, they know how offendable we really are. And when it comes to offending, this is what I love about being the preacher. When it comes to offending, probably nobody offended more or better or more thorough than Jesus himself. This is awesome. And then I get to stand up here and preach Jesus to you, this guy who offended people. So in reality, here's the way I think. You pay me to offend you on Sunday morning. Isn't that good? I love this job. This is so good. And if you've never been offended by Jesus, you probably have not read much of his Bible, you haven't spent much time in church, maybe you're not even a believer and a follower of Christ because Jesus, the things he did and the things he said could be very offensive. From the very first time I ever read this little story about Jesus and his disciples, I was really intrigued by the whole story at first, and I didn't understand it until I did some studying. You know, the more you read something and the more you understand it. It's found in Matthew chapter 15, and Matthew was an eyewitness to these things, so it's an eyewitness account of what he saw that day, and he records it for us so that we can read it, and it's all about being offended and how we respond with being offended. It's found in Matthew chapter 15, beginning in verse number 21. Matthew puts a detail in here that might mean nothing to us, but it's a huge detail, that Jesus left Galilee, and he goes north to the region of Tyre and Sidon. Jesus is going into enemy territory because the region of Tyre and Sidon was where the Canaanites lived. And the Canaanites and the Jews were enemies. Jesus now makes himself an illegal alien by entering into their region. And when he gets into the illegal territory, when he gets into the other country, he is going to encounter a woman with a great request when he gets there. The Canaanites and the Israelites, long-standing enemies. And Matthew, he just zeroes in on that little detail. So somewhere along the line, when they cross the border, it says in verse number 22 that a Gentile woman, here again, a Gentile woman, Jesus and his followers were of Jewish descent. They're in Gentile territory. So they get there, and there was a Gentile woman who lived there. She came to him, and she's got a pleading call to him. She says, "Have mercy on me, O Son of David, for my daughter is possessed by a demon that torments her severely." Now, if you were in the shoes of that woman, what would motivate you to approach Jesus, the Jew, and the Jewish followers? What would make you approach this awkward situation? I'll tell you what it was. It was desperation for her daughter. She needed to see something happen for her daughter. And so she's willing to go to an uncomfortable place to make an appeal to Jesus for the sake of her little girl. This is her baby, and all of us in this room have walked into a room where you just knew that nobody liked you. But if you got to be there, you got to be there. So she's desperate, and it really doesn't matter. And then this is amazing to me. Look how Jesus responds. She's crying out, Jesus, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed. She needs something. Look what Jesus does in verse number 23. But Jesus gave her no reply, not even a word. He ignored her. How rude. Can you believe Jesus would do that? Have you ever been offended because you were ignored? Somebody else got the problem. Somebody else got the promotion. Somebody else got the position. You didn't get the invitation. Somebody didn't share the news with you. You put yourself out there on social media. Nobody responded to it. They just ignored you. And there's people in churches all across the nation that are filled with people that are angry and upset and carried offenses because they got ignored. Somebody didn't notice me, and I thought I was more important than I really am. If you've been offended because you've been ignored, all of us have to say this to ourselves: get over it. You just got to get over it. You just got to move past it and beyond it. Verse number 23, the story gets better. Look at this. Then his disciples urged him. Oh, I love these disciples. These are the ones that were supposed to be learning from Jesus how to act like Jesus. And look what they did. They urged him, send her away. Tell her to go away, they said. She is bothering us with all her begging. Look at that pronoun that's in there. Us. It's like it's us versus her. It's us versus them. Us versus they. And you've heard speech like that. You know those people. You know that type. You know that kind. And so suddenly we distinguish ourselves as being superior and better than somebody else because, well, you know those people. And that's exactly what the disciples were doing here. Send her away. She's bothering us in this place. You know what? We're Jews, Jesus. We're so much better than this Gentile woman, this Canaanite Gentile woman. And I bet you Jesus maybe pulled back for a moment right there and goes, wait, guys. If you think you're better than this woman, do you know what you were when I called you? Peter, you were a fisherman. You stunk. John, you were a fisherman. You stunk. And Matthew, you were a tax collector. Nobody likes you. So what makes you think you're all it? You weren't that special and that great when I called you either. And some of you have been put off by a group. Some of you have been put off by a group where you felt like it was them versus me. And unfortunately, sometimes people can feel that way in a church. They can feel that way in a church, hurt by the people who represent Jesus. You've heard me say it in here before. Look, if you've not been offended at Life Church yet, you just have not been attending here long enough. We're equal opportunity offenders. Are you with me on that? If you stay here for any length of time, you will get offended. And when you get offended, say it with me, get over it, right? It's going to happen. We're going to get offended. Do you know why? Because we have feelings. And we're amongst people all the time. Just get over it. And then as if he hasn't offended her enough. Oh, it gets better. Look at verse number 24. Then Jesus said to the woman, I was sent only to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel. Let me interpret that verse for you. Woman, you are none of my business, and I am none of your business, so just buzz off and leave me alone. I'm not here for you. Talk about being offended. Girl, I'm not here for you, is what he's saying. He's here for the lost sheep of Israel. In other words, you don't matter. Have you ever felt insignificant before? You ever been offended because you felt insignificant? It happens to us all the time. We feel important. We walk in the room and we just feel so important. This last week, we had the privilege of going out and seeing our son in Southern California. Let me just say this. Any Californians here? Let me get a shout out. Californians, they're friendly people. Okay, there's 2 here. All right. They're all in California. So here, I thought I was so important in California. I felt so important in that state. Those people have an amazing way of making you feel good because wherever I went, the people went there too. If I was on the freeway, they were on the freeway. If I went to the restaurant, they were in the restaurant. If I went to the store, they're at the store. I just felt like a rock star, you know? And we can all feel really important in certain circles, but then somebody else enters the room and it's almost like we're just a wallflower and we don't even exist. Just imagine something like this with me. Let's say you're leaving church today and you're walking out there and you're walking on that good North Dakota ice and you slip, you sprain your ankle. Robin whips around in our nice pickup, our white pickup truck, so we fit in with Williston. And she gives you a ride. She gives you a ride to the hospital. There's nobody else in the waiting room. There's nobody else in the ER. You are the most important person right there. Wow, look at that. And you've got doctors and nurses, and they're just doting on you and taking care of that sprained ankle, and you feel all special. And then suddenly the door is open, and it's a serious case. There's a gunshot wound. And then they look at you and go, we'll get back to you later. Oh, wait. That's the kind of hospital this is? You don't love me? You don't love me enough? What, my ankle's not that important to you? Come on. All of us have been in a situation where we felt insignificant like that. And offenses become the lens through which we look through everything. And you know people that walk around with offense. They're crabby, they're grumpy, they're inconsolable. You don't want to hang out with them. They talk about other people poorly, and they kind of go on and on and on. They look through the lens of offense. Listen, being offended doesn't make you right. Being offended doesn't make you right. It just makes you a jerk, okay? That's from my wife. I must have said something bad there. We all just come at life with different experiences. And when offended, don't post your offense on social media. Get on your knees and just pray about it, okay? Now look what she does. This is awesome. I love the character of this woman. The story's far from over. Look at verse 25. She comes to Jesus and she worships him, pleading again, Lord, help me. She worships him. She's not offended. She's not put off by Jesus' remarks or his actions. She gets down on her knees. She needs a miracle for her baby girl. She's going to worship through the offense. I'm not going to be put off by you, Jesus. I'm going to worship you. And when you're offended, get on your knees, not on the internet. When you're offended, get on your knees and seek the face of God, not the face of somebody who's going to listen to your rant. This woman gets on her knees and she begins to worship Jesus. Our culture is so narcissistic that when there's a little problem or a bump in our life, we can put it all over the internet and gain all kinds of followers and go, yeah, you're right. If we've been offended that way, look, just get over it because offenses are inevitable. Being offended is an option. Happens for all of us. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's all about Jesus. Now, Jesus really, he's not done being offensive yet. This gets even better yet. This is better. This is what I love about this whole thing. In fact, he's going to be offensive not just to the woman now, I think to the followers, to his followers, his closest followers. Look what goes on in verse 26. Jesus responds to her, it's not right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. Did Jesus say what I just think he said? Did Jesus just call this woman a dog? Is that the Jesus you sing to on Sunday morning? Would Jesus really call somebody a dog? Well, if you go back in the original language that this was written in, there was two kinds of dogs back in the day. There were wild dogs and there were pet dogs. And Jesus here is not calling her a wild dog. Aren't you glad for that? He's calling her a pet dog. Listen, a dog's a dog. He just called this woman a dog. This is in your Bible as well as it's in my Bible. I'm just telling you, he's not speaking to her, though, in this matter and in this moment. He's speaking to the self-righteousness of the disciples who just looked at her as having the same value as the dog. It's the offense of just being insulted. Anybody ever insulted you before? You ever said something about what you're wearing, how you look? Who you married? I don't know. They just insult you, you know. Situations you're in, they just insult you. And she's not put off by this, though. Don't miss this. This is so good, so good. Verse 27, she replied, you know what? It's true, Lord. But even dogs are allowed to eat the scraps that fall beneath their master's table. She's not put off by Jesus. You know what? She rationalizes this. She's thinking, you can call me a dog if you want to, and you can call me a pet dog if you want to. And you know what I love about being called a pet dog? At least a pet dog has a name. A wild dog doesn't have a name. You can call me Fifi, you can call me Ringo, you can call me whatever you want to. And if I'm your pet dog, at least I get to live under the roof of your house. I get to sit under your table. And if you have steak, I get to eat steak. If you have cheesecake, I have cheesecake. If you have whatever, I'm going to have it too. I have some dignity and some value because I'm the master's dog. I'm happy to be a dog, but I'm living under the master's table. Jesus, if you're my master, I'll have everything that you have. That's a great thing about this story. You can use your offenses to be stepping stones or stumbling blocks. And this is awesome. This woman uses the offense. She uses Jesus' actions and comments to be a stepping stone to the miracle. At some point in time, I think this woman is repeating in her head, after she's been called a dog, after she's been ignored by Jesus, you just need to get over it. Get over it, because you got a little baby girl that needs a miracle, and we're going to press through to get the miracle. And I'm not going to be put off by an offense and miss out on the miracle. I don't want an offense to stand between me and the miracle. I need something from God in 2020. I need to get close to where He is in 2020. And I'm not going to let the offense of years past, even of this morning, to get between me and realizing the miracle that Jesus might have for me. Look what happens in verse number 28. Dear woman, Jesus said to her, your faith is great, your request is granted, and your daughter was gradually healed. Instantly healed. Instantly healed. She got over it. She wasn't put off by the offense. On the other side of pressing through, when she decided to get on her knees and worship Jesus, even though Jesus is trying to put her off, I'm not going to be put off. I'm not going to be insulted. I'm not going to be offended. I'm going to worship. I'm going to worship. I'm going to worship through. And on the other side of the worship, she got to the miracle instead of hanging on to the offense. Are you hanging on to an offense? A miracle was waiting on the other side of an offense, but only when she worshiped through the offense. Listen, I know some offenses are deep. Some offenses wound very deep. But at some point, you got to get over it. Get over the offense and just bring on the miracle. And this year, I want to challenge you to being better about not being so cotton picking offended all the time. You know what? Before Robin and I went off to Bible college to go into the ministry, a wise sage man from this church sat us down. And in fact, his grandson is in this church in this service this morning. And I'll never forget some of the things that he said to us. And they were so good and so appropriate. He said, you need to know this, that people are sometimes thoughtless and they're careless with their words. And when they say things that could offend you and hurt you, you need to let the words just roll off you like water off a duck's back. There, I identified with all of our hunting men in this place this morning. But people say things just thoughtlessly. And you know what? I have done the same thing. I'm a jokester, and I like to kid people, and I know that I have said things that were offensive to somebody. I didn't mean it offensive. I just wanted to be funny. And when you can get past the offenses, you can experience the miracles of freedom, and the miracles of grace, and the miracles of peace. Listen. If you miss anything else I said this morning, we're going to pray in just a moment. If you miss anything else, offenses are inevitable. Offenses are inevitable. Offended is a choice. You can be offended. You can live in offense. You can wear the wound, and you can carry that big old heavy rock around if you want to, but I don't want to be that way. Offenses are inevitable. Offended is an option. And I don't know about you, but I want 2020 to be a year when I have relationships with people where I'm not walking around in offense. And some of you today, you're on the cusp of a miracle. You're on the edge of something that you need from God, but you can't get it because every time you start moving towards God, this offense thing comes up again. And today we need to move beyond the offense. We're just going to lay some offenses down. We're going to put them aside, and we're going to press on towards the miracle. Listen, you have feelings. I have feelings. All of us have a heart. Sometimes we say things that we don't mean. Sometimes we wound people and we didn't want to wound them. We have been wounded by people that never intended to wound us. We just took it differently. It just goes on that way. We are human beings with emotions and feelings. We hear things and perceive things and feel things. But at some point in time, church, you have to recognize that it's not about you and it's not about me. So we just need to get over it, to move beyond it, to move past it. The person that offended you is probably dead. They don't even know that they offended you. They're living somewhere else. They don't even know what they said, but you're carrying around the wound of that offense. And every time you enter into the next relationship, you carry that wound and that offensiveness with you. And you're caustic. You're toxic in that relationship. People don't want to spend time with you because every time they spend time with you, you dredge up the past and you start talking again about how they did you wrong and they got that and I didn't get this and they owed me this and I was due this and the checkout person at the cash register was so rude to me. Get over it. Move beyond it. It's not about you, it's about the kingdom work of Jesus Christ. And let's move past the offenses and let's move into the place where we can find the miracle that you need in your life. The miracle of peace, the miracle of freedom, the miracle of joy. You need these miracles in your life. Let's move beyond it. Offenses are inevitable. Offendedness is an option.